Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a very well, what I'd say earlier than what I'm used to, Barstools and Bandtalk, Rimshots with Sean episode. I am with, you're going to get to know this guy really well in the next few minutes. Mr. Dave Marskell from the museum. He's in Toronto. We spent the last few weeks in Havana. Dave, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. I'm glad to be here. I'm actually in Kitchener, but
Kitchener.
I did grow up in Toronto and was there for many years.
Kitchener's you know what? I lived in Toronto 7 years. And Kitchener's what do they call that area down there? It's not the Golden Horseshoe, but what do they call that?
The technology triangle, the tech triangle.
Right. That's the hub of Canada for that. So the reason why I reached out to, I know Peter Hendrickson quite well, and there's a little old thing that kind of rolled into town here a number of months ago that's really and people can see in the background the Steel Wheels exhibit. And you had a hand in bringing that in, and tell us a little bit about how that came to be.
Yeah, during the many shutdowns for COVID, we were closed, obviously, like everybody else. The museum was closed here in Kitchener, and it allowed us to do a little strategy planning, sort of midterm, short-term planning, how the hell we were going to get through all this. And it also was we were able to start to reach out to the Rolling Stones manager and just say, this exhibit that you've had in about a dozen other world-class cities, London, Tokyo, it was in Australia, New York City, we would love to bring it here. And so we spent some time proving our credentials, if you will, that we were able to pull this off. We had worked with other great brands, like we had working with the Grammy Museum. We had Bob Marley exhibit One Love. We've worked with Yoko Ono a couple times, the Titanic exhibit, things like that. So we finally broke through and gained their confidence, and we were to open the show last November 2021, and to bring it to Canada for its only date.
So out of curiosity, how does Halifax get on the radar? I mean, I know from talking to you, but a lot of people have asked me, and I said I don't want to provide false information or fake news. So how did Halifax get on the radar?
Yeah, so just the way COVID worked, and we were postponed a month and open a month and closed a month and half capacity, and it started to bump the dates. And at the same time, the Stones were on tour. And so I started to work with the band manager, Joyce, saying, can we have the show for other dates in Canada? Can we have the Canadian rights? And so we were able to negotiate 3 dates. We took the show to Winnipeg last summer, and I was planning to bring it back to Toronto now. And then I began chatting with Rob Steele. He and I became friendly, and we'd actually seen the Stones together a couple of times. And I started to think, this is what the Rolling Stones would do. They went to Halifax in 2006, I believe. They were in Moncton. And yes, it could be a big show in Toronto, but Halifax, like a smaller center like Kitchener, deserved it and deserves world-class exhibits. So that's where I started, and I started working with Rob and his team to craft a deal. And we opened in Halifax, and I'm just delighted. Steel Wheels, the special events venue at Bears Lake, is phenomenal. What they've created out there is terrific, and this world-class exhibition to launch that, I think, is awesome as well.
Yeah, we'll look forward to doing more with the Bears Lake location. But interestingly enough, when the Stones played here, it was a torrential downpour that night, and it didn't deter a single person from going. I had a show that night, and I was playing on a tourism boat that was supposed to go around the harbor, and we didn't leave dockside. But I just remember there was such a buzz about that show for the month leading up to it, and probably a good 2 to 3 weeks leading, afterwards. Same buzz is going on. It has been going on with this exhibit. We kind of you mentioned small town and smaller sort of location. People here tend to really support things like that because I think maybe we feel we don't get them enough.
Yeah, and I did a lot of media when we hosted it for the first time in Kitchener, and the question that came from the Toronto media and right across Canada is how the hell did Kitchener get this? And the band manager was asked that by the Toronto Star, and her answer was they're tenacious, and it was easier to say yes than to put up with Marskell's emails. But the end of the conversations, or an inevitable question, was always, how did you get this here, and so on. And again, that we just bulldozed our way through to make sure that we got it. And at the end of the conversations, I would always say, maybe we're not a B city anymore. Maybe we're a B plus. And I think Halifax and Atlantic Canada, as I said a few moments ago, we're not small centers. We're all approaching A city status, and this just helps us take it up a notch.
Well said, and I think that we just had the World Juniors here, we shared it with Moncton, but I think when an event takes place in Halifax, and don't get me wrong, there's things about Halifax that still need to improve, but I think when we host an event here, we have that little bit of a chip on our shoulder, like, yeah, we don't want everybody else to say, I told you it wasn't going to be a good place, so we work a little bit harder to make sure that it's not B plus, A plus 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 when an event takes place.
Exactly, and Halifax continues to pull it off and do great things. And from an economic development point of view, it's great for the city of Atlantic Canada, because we've got people coming to this show from across Atlantic Canada, from the U.S., certainly from outside of the region, and that bodes well for the restaurants and the bars, and basically to reboot the hospitality sector in part. Certainly, the World Juniors did that as well. But it goes beyond the exhibition, and it really helps the local economy.
That's well said, and I'd like to go into your background a little bit here, because you and I had a great chat about that. However, when you mentioned reboot the bars in the hospitality sector, I have some friends that live in Ontario, and I kind of know what happened here. The big, I guess, piece that I guess was mentioned here by people that were in it was the communication wasn't great. You didn't know from one day to the next what was going to take place, and you were expected to pivot, but you didn't really know what that was going to look like. And one day you're open, the next day you close. Is it kind of the same thing that happened up there?
Oh, 100%. And as I said, in our particular case, we were loaded, ready to go. This came with like a dozen 53-foot tractor trailers. This is a monster show. It took us 2 months to load it in, and we were ready to go. And we had sold tickets, and we were closed. We were shut down for an entire month. And we, again, worked with the band manager because this was going to have a ripple effect across their other tour dates back into Europe and so on. So we worked it all out with the museum world, other museums around the world, to make this happen. And then we were open a month, closed a month, as I mentioned, and it was the same. And we worked all hard with the bars. We worked a lot with the bars and restaurants, and we bought gift certificates for our staff. And then when we finally got up and running, the hospitality sector also sort of started to work with us, and many of them were creating specialty drinks, the Mick Jagger drink or cocktail or Charlie Watts, and that type of thing was great. And we had hotel and restaurant packages. The hotels were really pushing it out, come for dinner, stay overnight, see the show, that type of thing. So it was everybody working together. We got through it all, but it's behind us enough now that it's like, wow, what a time that was.
Yeah, I was watching a TV show last night, and it was a drama, but they were focusing on COVID. It was just like, wow, it wasn't that long ago, but some of the things that were taking place were mind bending. So when you and I chatted the other day, again, I mentioned I lived in Toronto. I used to spend a lot of time at Exhibition Place, a lot of time. You come to tell me that you were a key player there. One of my favorite exhibits of all time was Screamers, which is the Halloween. Tell everybody about your background, because I mean, you just don't happen to be the guy that gets the rights to a Stone show and sets it up. You've got a vast background in this thing.
Yeah, I've predominantly been in the cultural attractions world, if you will. I came out of university as a bit of an entrepreneur, and found out that I was a bit of an entrepreneur, and I always knew I had a little bit of creativity. And I landed a job pretty early in terms of my age at Exhibition Place as director of marketing. So I was responsible for marketing the year-round activities and helping to support my colleagues who were selling the home show and boat show and rentals and things like that. But my real focus was the 18-day C&E. And that was again a huge show. Basically 300 acres, 11 buildings, 13 stages, and all in the course of 18 days. And you've had the food building and the midway and the air show, and you just prayed that it wasn't going to rain for those 18 days. It was a blast. We did some really fun things. We created the feature country that we had for the 12 years I was there. We would focus on a different culture, which was great. Got to meet so many cool people that played on our band shell. Johnny Cash, just amazing people. So I was there for 12 years. I spent a bit of time at Ontario Place across the street, at the tail end of SARS, which was a big issue in Toronto, and there was a disconnect with the general population and the Asian Chinese population. So I created, working with China, a Chinese lantern festival, and these lanterns were as big as your house, and there was about 36 of them on the West Island, and would open at night, and they would sparkle off the water, and it really helped to reconnect the communities after that issue of SARS. So yeah, and then I came. A search firm brought me out to Kitchener 16 years ago. This was a children's museum in a downtown department store they had reclaimed, largely funded by the tech community. RIM certainly had the lead on that. And it didn't really meet expectations right from the get-go, but it's a large facility. And when the search firm brought me here, I think they did a great job, because it was what I needed at that stage of my career. And I think my board and people would say that I've done a reasonable job here. So we had to rebrand, but slowly move away from just for children. And now we have way more children than we ever had when we were called a children's museum. We have 100,000 visitors annually. We don't have a collection. We're very unique in that regard. So we can pursue something like the Stones unzipped. And as I said earlier, we've had a lot of really cool pop culture exhibits, but we have things for all stages of life. For 55 and better, we call it, for seniors, and a children family program, solid program there. So it's really cool. It's really unique, and like Halifax, we deserve it. This community deserves it, and that's why, again, back to, I think Halifax they're doing such great things. They deserve the Unzipped show.
What a great way to end segment one. Segment two, I want to focus on what people can see. I mentioned to you, I have a friend that's been out there a number of times. He's a huge Stones fan. It's like he's gone to the Mecca, like he's gone to, visit the Pope in Rome, the Vatican, right? So anyway, we'll be back after this.